Welcome friends, James Corbett here, CorbettReport.com, and just before we get into this week's Eye-Opener Report, I want to direct your attention once again to the front page of BoilingFrogsPost.com, where people who have been keeping track of the website will know we are in the midst of the second quarter fundraising drive, attempting to raise $12,000 for the maintenance and upkeep of the various podcasts and video series that are spilling out from across that website and its feeds. And people who do keep track of the website will know that this of course includes the weekly podcasts from Peter B. Collins and Andrew Gavin Marshall and Guillermo Jimenez, as well as the brand new video series from Charlie McGrath of Wide Awake News called On Point that premiered last week, and if you haven't checked it out yet, I hope you will do so at the Boiling Frogs Post YouTube channel, and also the forthcoming podcast series from Sibel Edmonds herself, which I am very much looking forward to, and I know a number of you out there are as well. But of course, once again, this media is brought to you by you. It does require your support in order to keep going, and although we are halfway through this funding drive, we are only 1/6 of the way towards the goal so far, so we are going to most likely fall short at this rate, and that means something will have to give, and I don't know what that will be yet, but it will be some way that this media will have to be cut back as a result. So if you haven't yet contributed to this fundraising drive and you do appreciate any or all of these podcasts and video series, please consider contributing to the website. As people know, I put my money where my mouth is, and I donate the Eye-Opener Report completely for free to the BoilingFrogsPost.com website because I do support that website and I do support the work that's coming out of there. And if you appreciate it as well, remember this alternative media is brought to you by you and not advertisers, not corporate money, not foundation money. It is brought to you by you guys out there. So I do want to wholeheartedly thank and show my appreciation for all of you who have contributed to this fundraising drive already, and for those who haven't, please consider doing so. And on that note, let's get straight into this week's Eye-Opener Report. Felix made 8 birthday invitations with hearts. He made some more with stars. He made 17 invitations in all. How many invitations had hearts? Irene has a favorite day of the week. She chose this day because it is the only day that has an eye in it. What is Irene's favorite day? Show your work in the tank. Make the sentence less wordy by replacing the underlined words with a possessive noun phrase. The commands of government officials must be obeyed by all. These problems, and countless more like them, have shown up online in recent months. They are examples culled from worksheets, tests, homework assignments, and other materials developed under the United States Common Core K-12 educational standards, an initiative designed, according to the Common Core official website, to provide a set of high-quality academic standards in mathematics and English language arts literacy. Its critics, however, see it very differently. A lot of that criticism has been directed at examples of overly complicated, baffling, impossible, or utterly meaningless questions and activities that have been developed to meet these standards, or on controversial statements like those of Amanda August, a curriculum developer in a Chicago suburb, who was berated for seeming to imply that under Common Core math, 3 times 4 equals 11 will be an acceptable response.
But even under the new Common Core, even if they said 3 times 4 was 11, if they were able to explain their reasoning and explain how they came up with their answer really in words and in oral explanations, and they showed it in the picture, but they just got the final number wrong, we're really more focusing on the how and the
why. Going to be correcting them.
Oh, absolutely, right? Absolutely. We want our students to compute correctly, but the emphasis is really moving more towards the explanation.
Common Core's defenders argue that the questions and assignments showing up online are examples of individual school boards' interpretation of the standards and do not reflect on Common Core themselves. They also point out that August was not saying that teachers wouldn't correct students' incorrect answers, only that greater emphasis will be placed on showing the process by which students deduce those answers. More serious criticism of Common Core has been leveled at the standards themselves and their development by a host of critics, including professors of education, mathematicians, former members of the Department of Education, the largest teachers' union in the country, and countless other professionals. Some of the most impassioned critiques, however, come from the affected students themselves. One notable example is Ethan Young, a high school senior who spoke out against Common Core at the November 6, 2013 meeting of the Knox County School Board regular meeting.
Here's the history of the Common Core. In 2009, the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers partnered with Achieve, Inc., a nonprofit that received millions of funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Thus, the initiative seemed to spring from states when in reality it was contrived by an insular group of educational testing executives with only 2 academic content specialists. Neither specialist approved the final standards, and the English consultant, Dr. Sandra Stotsky, publicly stated she felt the standards left students with an empty skill set, lacking literary knowledge. While educators and administrators were later included in the validation committee and feedback groups, they did not play a role in the actual drafting of the standards. The product is a, quote, rigorous preparation for career and college, yet many educators agree that rigorous is a buzzword. These standards aren't rigorous, just different, designed for an industrial model of school. Nevertheless, Common Core emerged. Keep in mind the specific standards were never voted upon by Congress, the Department of Education, state or local governments, yet their implementation was approved by 49 states and territories. The president essentially bribed states into implementation via Race to the Top, offering $4.35 billion taxpayer dollars to participating states, $500 million of which went to Tennessee. And much like No Child Left Behind, the program promises national testing and a one-size-fits-all education because, hey, it worked really well the first time. While I do admire some aspects of the course, such as fewer standards and an emphasis on application and writing, it's not going to fix our academic deficit. If nothing else, these standards are a glowing conflict of interest, and they lack the research they allegedly received. And most importantly, the standards illustrate a mistrust of teachers, something I believe this county has already felt for a while.
As Young mentioned, only 2 academic content specialists participated in the drafting of the standards, and neither of them actually approved the standards that were eventually drafted. Both specialists, education professor Dr. Sandra Stotsky and Stanford mathematician Dr. James Milgram, now travel the country warning parents of the complete inadequacy of Common Core for preparing American students for college entry or for the necessary skills to compete in the 21st century.
You have to understand that there were obviously certain ideas about what Common Core was designed to get at by the time it finished coming up with the standards that would determine college readiness. That students could enter a community-level college and have guaranteed for them, if they passed a test based on these college readiness standards, would have guaranteed for them credit-bearing freshman courses. That was the basic idea before college readiness standards, that they would supposedly ensure that students were college ready. And the irony was that the 2 groups who would normally get together in almost any common sense view of the situation, those who teach college freshmen math or English, and high school teachers of math or English, were for the most part not on any of these committees. That was the basic problem that started the Common Core.
In 2009, I was appointed to the Common Core Validation Committee, and as was mentioned, I was the only actual mathematician, and indeed the only member of the entire committee which was overseeing the development of one of the most important works in education in many, many years, and I was the only one with a PhD in content and not in education. So I took it on myself to try to get the best possible document in mathematics. However, in the end, as has been mentioned, I could not sign off on the document that had resulted because it's not internationally benchmarked, and indeed, there's no research behind it. In particular, there is no guarantee whatsoever that any of these courses will work. The most dramatic of these, of course, is the purely experimental geometry course, which the only evidence for that is back in the late 1970s. For a couple years, the Russians developed a course very much like this, And it was so roundly condemned by the teachers, by the students, and indeed by the whole country, that it disappeared after 2 years.
So if the Common Core is so reviled by teachers, students, education standards proponents, principals, and seemingly every other sector of society with a direct stake in them, why are they being promoted so heavily? Where is the funding for this initiative coming from?
If you do have commonality, it's like an electrical plug, you get more free market competition. Scale is good for free market competition. Individual state regulatory capture is not good for competition. And so this thing in terms of driving innovation, you'd think that sort of pro-capitalistic market-driven people would be in favor of it. But you know, somehow it's gotten to be controversial, and you know, states will decide. Whatever they want to decide is fine.
Common Core has been developed with the direct support of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which has invested $173 million in the development of Common Core materials and promoting the initiative at the state level, and an estimated $2.3 billion in total funding related to Common Core standards development, including grants for the development of biometric bracelets that will monitor students' interest level in class. And you start out that article with a very specific discussion of a Gates Foundation-funded program called the Measures of Effective Teachers Project. So perhaps you can tell us about this project and its significance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Measures of Effective Teachers Project is part of a $45 million plan to quantify, to measure school teachers' alleged efficiency in delivering the public school curriculum. The project has a great many individuals involved, including academic psychologists, sociologists, education scholars, even a statistician from the RAND Corporation. The experiment began in 2009 and focuses mainly on inner-city schools. Now, the whole idea behind this is the establishment of a metrics for identifying techniques to maintain young people's attention spans. This looks to be, in part, a type of audience research, complete with galvanic skin bracelets to measure student behaviors and reactions. So the ostensible use of the data will be to determine how teachers will be hired, compensated, promoted, and so on. We have to be put on guard when we hear terms such as measurement or quantification, especially when it comes to education and teaching, because these were the techniques originally used to bring psychology into the American educational enterprise to begin with. The fact that this is being done to mainly African American and Latino children in inner city schools should also call to mind how early social science has been used to perpetuate eugenics and emphasize the alleged racially specific inferiorities of non-whites. So the project overall essentially involves the dehumanization of what is an inherently human process, that is, cultivating individuals to recognize and aspire to a higher intellectual level. The public school curriculum, the abundance of standardized testing, and now programs like these collectively act as a harness on real education. It's an attempt to refine the psychological conditioning and curriculum delivery process for a curriculum that is more or less dead on arrival and intended to discourage independent thought and curiosity.
If the interest that billionaires like the Gates and other Common Core advocates displayed in revising educational standards were merely about dumbing down the math and language skills of children across America, that would be bad enough. But the ramifications of this process do not stop at the ability to add, subtract, or spell. They go right to the heart of a vision for society that was laid out over a century ago, and perhaps most baldly articulated by President Woodrow Wilson himself in his 1909 address to the New York City High School Teachers Association, where he admitted, "We want one class of persons to have a liberal classical education, and we want another class of persons, a very much larger class of necessity, in every society, to forego the privileges of liberal education and fit themselves to perform specific, difficult manual tasks. As educators like former New York State Teacher of the Year John Taylor Gatto have exhaustively documented over decades of study, the end goal of this process is, and always has been, to prepare students solely for the purpose of being obedient workers and citizens in a status quo owned and operated by the political, economic, and industrial elite.
You'd learn that young people are really captives of a desperate utopian scheme to hold them subordinate to the will of managers. A vast utopian scheme to extend their childhoods far beyond the natural term so they might better fit the hierarchical nature of corporate economies and corporate societies.
That the conscious manipulation of the masses into obedient workers is the real end goal of these educational reforms is made explicit in example after example from the Common Core materials that promote blind allegiance to and obedience to government in inappropriate and blatantly propagandistic ways.
What do you think kids who can't read well are writing about? I'll give you an example from my own home state of Wisconsin. Little Hudson, Wisconsin, had a viral, went national, right? Where little kids in my state were sent home, third graders, and given the following writing assignment. Tell us how the state is just like the family, but better. That was their writing assignment. And this, I'm now giving away the game. If you ask me, you put a gun to my head and ask me, what in one word Common Core is? That's it. It's statism. It has nothing to do with education. It is a concerted effort on the part of the government to convince your kids they belong first to the government and second to you. It is a drive at every sense of in every sense of curriculum we're going to look at. It seeks to divorce parents from children, to make kids wards of the state.
Everything you have been told about Common Core is a lie. It is not a state initiative. It was not developed by educators. It is not going to better prepare students for college or real-world applications. It is part of a century-long process of using the education system to mold students into more obedient workers and tax cattle. And it is promoted by billionaires with hidden agendas of their own. After all, if Common Core is worthy of hundreds of millions of dollars in direct investment and billions of dollars in indirect investment, why doesn't Gates send his own children to a school that actually makes use of the standards? Instead, the prestigious Lakeside School in Seattle that the Gates children attend does not mention the Common Core math or language arts standards anywhere on their website and explicitly states that their school is for more advanced children and thus eschews the standard testing that forms the basis of the Common Core system. As opposition to Common Core continues to rise and implementation continues to proceed, concerned parents, students, and community members would do well to ask why Common Core is good enough for their own children, but not for the privileged offspring of the Gates and the other billionaire oligarchs behind the modern education system. This video is brought to you by the subscribers of BoilingFrogsPost.com. For more information on this and other topics, please go to BoilingFrogsPost.com. For more information and commentary from James Corbett, please go to CorbettReport.com.